Magdalene's blog 22. Sitting in the library, taking a break from our copying work, Ariane and I were discussing things that had and were shaping the world we live in. Different cultures continue to contribute to the complex web that make Antioch and Astarte's temple in it what it has become. Traditions of Egypt, Assyria, Persia, Greece, Syria, and Israel too, blended in the cauldron that is the Roman world. Mostly it is the strongest that make the rules and take the spoils, but to us it seems that something else drives us on to the greater ends as well. Some say that the gods and goddesses are the rulers, whilst others that we have to find a way for ourselves. What is the greater meaning that we are a part of? Had the gods once walked the earth like us and lead its people still? Or did it happen through specially gifted ones, able to be in touch with the divine, such as our prophets of Israel? It was our business to find out and understand how all these were woven together, what the pattern was, so that we could do our service better. Ariane told me how Estelle had been continuing the ancient work of reading this from the heavens themselves. The starry revelations, she had called them, where all things were made plain to those who knew how to see. I mentioned that I had seen Sarita in the marketplace the day before, and that she had invited us around to her new home in a few days' time. I was wondering if Ariane would be interested in the many stories of her homeland that she often used to tell when we were novices together. Belle had come in and crossed to where we were. She had a knack of somehow catching a moment and taking it to another level. I had a fleeting impression that she might have been listening. Isis, she said. Isis is the goddess that is also the priestess. She is our pattern and is the secret of the highest level of our revelation, Magdalene. When you are ready, she could be your guide. We've been working on copying a tableau with Isis in it. Is the tablet ready? Asked Belle, as though she was reading my thoughts. Not quite, Belle, said Ariane. Is the lady here? Not today, answered our high priestess. Today I only need the star charts for the 5 friends of Desmina, Councillor Gregory's wife. But I shall need it tomorrow, when I go to the governor's palace. It is his lady that is the keen devotee of the Egyptian mysteries. Philippa had also now joined us, bringing the required charts. Belle thanked her as she took the scrolls and turned to me again. Isis wears the veil that separates the mortal from the immortal, she said. I was like a sponge soaking up this vital information. Then I remembered Sarita. High Priestess, I began, when we saw Sarita yesterday, who was married recently to Caspar, the Zoroastrian nobleman, Belle nodded, showing me she knew of whom I talked. She invited a few of her former temple friends to visit their house at the evening of the next new moon. Is it all right if we go? Bilal considered, realizing that Ayala was one of these friends and had also been central to the recent troubles. Our work is just as much with the women of the city, she said. We have a duty to make the most of our connections. Her expression softened. She even smiled. Of course you must go. Then adding with steely seriousness, but there are not many chances given on the way. The goddess will not be mocked. Your lessons and those of your friends must be learnt quickly. When that day came, we set off from the eastern gate with Ariane and Nerian, and one donkey to carry our gifts and baggage as well. Carmel led the donkey, and Nerian led the way. Ayala was in good spirits, and closer than ever with Helena. Ariane and I walked at the rear, happy to be out in the town, and I to be going to visit a dear friend. We had been to Sarita's wedding, but since then had only had messages from her, till the day I saw her at the market. She had looked really happy and had been accompanied by 2 other women, one of whom I took to be her mother-in-law, a fine-looking woman of noble bearing, who had also seemed very proud of her new daughter-in-law. The route we took this time was different from the way to the central market areas, but no less fascinating. First, there was a district of quite large and impressive houses straddling the hill that bordered the southeast of the city. Then we passed through a guarded gate into a crowded area of narrow streets of mixed housing and every sort of working shop you might need. In one was a blacksmith's that exuded greater heat and noise than even our temple kitchens, and several carpentry shops that had many lengths of dressed wood leaning against the walls, and the rich dusty smell of wood shavings. Another was full of stalls where cloths and clothes were stacked on trestle tables, and in the next street the unshuttered openings declared all manner of foods for sale. Some cooked, some not, and all the streets had awnings of every colour stretched out across the way. Women were standing at entrances, some with babies wrapped to their backs, arguing with each other, whilst young boys play fort around them, and a couple of men passed carrying loads that donkeys might have been proud of. Then we crossed a wider space where many people were sat around eating and drinking in the shade of a small stand of palm trees. A full day of activity in the suburb of one of the world's greatest cities, with straw and dirt and rivulets of smelly water spilling down into gutters to join the sundry rubbish there. Occasionally an outcast of some description interrupted the progress on the road, whom everyone would try to avoid. A deranged soul, or with some incurable illness, leprosy perhaps, or being possessed by a restless evil spirit. We would also close our ranks and hurry past. Then the streets opened out, and the activity lessened. Locked gates and grander house frontages indicated that there were less needs here for frantic struggling, and the places where the traders displayed their wares were finer, like those whose dresses beckoned to the rich and women, and where cobblers worked on their accompanying footwear out the back. Even the taverns here looked to afford better elbow space. We passed a synagogue and a butcher's shop nearby that had an entrance strung with a colour-beaded curtain. Young men walked together down the road, clearly Jewish. One glanced at us and then away again, with interest only for themselves, unusual amongst the young men of Antioch, and I recoiled a little at their haughty indifference. Then another group joined our street from a side alley, engaged in lively conversation. One young man in particular caught my eye, his handsome face animated whatever they were talking about. He seemed to smile in my direction as we passed, and I thought in that moment that he looked familiar too. Then they were past, and he was gone. Walking on, the afternoon seemed a little brighter. Ariane was talking to me about something, but I missed the meaning. "This is the Jewish quarter of town," I told her. "I know," she answered, looking at me sideways. "And your friend Sarita's husband lives on just the other side." "Is it like Magdalene at all?" she asked. "A bit, maybe," I answered lightly, savouring our walk in this marvellous city.